I know many of you, like me, are deeply invested in providing your children with a rich and meaningful education. And that's why we're here to talk about science today, because if you follow me at all, you know that I believe that science should not be treated as the ancillary subject it is in traditional school classrooms. And that actually is a recent development. Many of you are too young to realize this. I probably have stepkids who are your age or older. But I remember when they were going through school and science and history used to be, social studies used to be incorporated into daily lessons, not as literacy classes, not just through the reading of books. I don't think you have to look much further than the current state of the way of the mis and disinformation, the amount of conspiracy theories around science that people believe, and the amount of people that believe it to recognize that the way we are teaching science right now is failing. The way that you can measure whether we are failing at teaching a subject is by how skilled people are and how literate they are in the information surrounding those topics. So I'll get off my soapbox now because that is not the purpose of this talk. But science is a gateway for understanding the world around us. And one of the first things to think about is, what do you want to get out of it, your child to get out of a science education? I think that's the first place to start with any topic in education. What do you hope your child gets out of history, writing, but we're going to stick with science. So I want you to take a moment to think about it. Do you envision that your child needs science for college or career? Burning love of discovery, the ability to think critically and solve problems, understanding health related or climate related news, or perhaps, like most of us, you want all of those things. You imagine that a science education is going to help with all of those things. Here's the thing about science education: it is not just a collection of facts. And that's my issue when science these days is treated as the collection of facts that, you read a book about lizards and your child learned biology. No, they learned a lot of nonfiction information about lizards and probably helped them better their nonfiction reading skills, but they didn't learn science, because science is about a practice. Science is a philosophy that incorporates exploration within every part of it. And science is a doing activity. You can't learn science any more than you can learn writing without writing, painting without painting, or math without doing math problems. A science education is also important because it allows you to spot mis and disinformation, and it is one of the easiest and most likely ways that your child is going to improve their critical and analytical thinking skills, something that we should all be seriously thinking about making sure that our children have strong skills in. Okay, now I'm ready to get started. I just needed a soapbox moment. I'm Blair Lee, you probably know, and today I will be focusing on building a stellar science program, in your homeschool. And yes, design and engineering does count, in case you're wondering, so I'm really talking about that as well. Let's be honest, science can feel intimidating, especially in the middle and high school years when the content gets more complex. If you feel you didn't get a good science education, a lot of you will be wondering, how can I even teach this? And many of you are young enough to have learned science in school as through memorization, studying for tests. But that is not understanding science. And that's why there's this disconnect between, in my opinion, between the science that we learn, in particular in middle school and high school, and the inability to parse out what's real from not when we read about it in the news. A good science program fuels curiosity and a deep and a deep understanding. Your mindset around this really matters. You need to treat understanding how the natural and physical world works as essential knowledge. Before we get to the how-to of building your science program, I really want to start with mindset because it shapes everything that follows. Science is often treated as optional in the early years or something to squeeze in after reading and math. But understanding how the natural and physical world works is important. It helps our children make sense of the world they live in, from the food they eat to the technology they use, from the weather outside to the news headlines they see. When we prioritize science as essential, not secondary, we create space for curiosity, observation, and critical thinking. We show our children that science isn't just for scientists, it's for everyone, because we all live in this world. So, as your child's primary educator, I encourage you to approach science with purpose and curiosity. Model those for your kids, and they will follow your lead. Make it conceptual. One of the most powerful shifts you can make in your science teaching, especially in the later grades, is moving from memorization to understanding, and from treating high school science as applied math classes. Your child, hey, it's great if you can name the parts of a cell or what's going on with cell division, but you don't want to just memorize words and definitions. That might really help you on a test, but it doesn't help when it comes to deep and nuanced understanding of science. We need to frame, when we talk about science, we need to connect it with the real world. In this way, we can create a roadmap to stellar science. So there are 6 components to a stellar science program. The first one is hands-on lab work. You want to get the brain and the hands connected through the application of science theory and principles. Critical thinking, cultivating critical thinking through the process and practices of science is pretty easy. In fact, any good science curriculum does it for you. But it will help kids make sense as you go from making predictions to getting answers within the process of hands-on lab work. Real world connections. Science explains how the natural and physical world work. So it's one of the easiest subjects to connect to what's going on in the world through health, through news, through just the way what's going on in your daily life. Conceptual science with math in context. If you feel like there's too much math, or your child feels like there's too much math, they're letting you know that's a cognitive load issue. To understand issues about your health, you do not need to be able to figure out the molality of a solution. And I truly feel it's a real disservice when science classes boil down to that. Curriculum and resources. You want to use good curriculum and resources from people who you can trust to be presenting the facts, theories, and models as recommended by a majority of practicing experts in the field of science. And then you can be thoughtful about adapting it to different levels. Science is actually an area where it's fairly easy to adapt it to differentiate when you're teaching multiple learners. I've had a lot of experience doing that. So, right, if you've got any questions about how to do that, put them in the chat now, and then I'll get to them. Okay, let's start with hands-on lab work. Hands-on learning and the brain. One of the biggest mistakes in science education is treating it as like something you read about instead of doing. Oh, I guess that's just going to be a common theme in this talk. Don't do it. Imagine trying to teach your child to cook by handing them a recipe book, but never letting them into the kitchen. Hands-on learning is proven to be more effective at helping learners grasp what they're taught. And there's no shortage of studies that show hands-on learning has a significant impact. Here is one study that was conducted by Purdue University. That showed that students who went through active learning saw much higher test scores and improvement rates. Another study found that students who didn't engage in hands-on learning were 1.5 times more likely to fail a course than students who did. Now, part of that is just because it's more fun to do hands-on work. The reason hands-on learning is so effective at information retention involves both physiological and psychological impacts of learning style. Both sides of the brain are engaged. Hands-on learning better engages both sides. That means the brain is creating neural pathways between the two sides. Listening and analyzing processes occur in the left hemisphere, but visual and spatial processes are handling on the right. By combining multiple styles of learning, the brain forms stronger overall connections and is able to store more relevant, important information. Brain scans also show increased activity in sensory and motor related areas of the brain when thinking about concepts a learner has involve hands-on experience. Being able to touch and see something is simply more powerful than only reading about it. Looking at a picture of bacteria doesn't have as much impact as actually looking at it under a microscope or watching a video. Watching someone drill a screw into a board doesn't compare to the power of designing and engineering something with your own hands. Too often, getting an education means storing tidbits of trivia in your head until the associated exam has passed. And I think that the fact that this happens a lot in traditional schools has really led to this disenfranchisement with learning, where people are like, what is even the purpose of an education? Active learning through hands-on projects changes that thinking, changes that dynamic. It makes learning stick. It also makes it memorable, meaningful, and feel essential. Well, okay. Labs should teach scientific thinking. They should not just be cool. When I first wrote my science course for chemistry for third grade, a lot of people were using Janice Van Cleve. And Janice Van Cleve has some good labs in there, but there's no theory. So what you really need to do, labs should teach scientific thinking. And this means you've got to pair the hands-on work with theory. You've got to understand what it is you're looking for. You're going to ask a question, form a hypothesis. A hypothesis is a prediction based on what you know about the theory. Then you conduct the experiment, analyze results, and draw conclusions based on your observations. You don't base your conclusions on what you believe, you base them on your observations. This is very important, and it is the missing component that when you read people who really firmly are sure that something is true based on their beliefs, they aren't making the connection that those beliefs aren't based on things you can see and hold in your hands, direct observations. When we have labs that teach scientific thinking, this is sort of a really natural way to get at that point. Cultivating critical thinking, I'm just talking about it, getting ahead of myself. The scientific method is one of the best ways to teach critical thinking in action. In science lab settings, students get hands-on practice applying reasoning, testing ideas, and evaluating evidence. But let's expand upon that, because critical thinking is bigger than just the scientific procedure. Again, it's a mindset, and science education is one of the most powerful ways to develop it. Because science is not just about memorizing fact, it's also about asking good questions, testing ideas, and making sense. It's about learning how to think, not just what to think. Science encourages curiosity. Asking why and how questions throughout the day before an experiment, having your child make predictions, then testing, observing outcomes, and revising that thinking. It encourages curiosity. It encourages learners to dig deep and look for answers. Using the claim evidence reasoning framework is, so you make a claim, you look for evidence, and then you reason out the answers based on that evidence. You do not assume that the claim is the answer without evidence to support it. And then invite your child to investigate misconceptions like, we only use 10% of our brain. This not only sharpens the research skills, but it also builds scientific literacy and healthy skepticism. In this way, you make a claim. What do you think? You look for evidence, what supports it, and then reasoning. How does this evidence support the claim? For example, if your learner says plants need sunlight to grow, ask them to explain how they know and ask them how, if they have observations that support this. The goal is not just to teach science. And this is something for you to think about, especially with older learners. You are not just teaching them science. You are teaching kids to think like scientists, to think like critical thinkers. This is a life skill that will serve your learner in every subject and in the world beyond school. The goal also isn't just to give kids the right answers. It's to guide them so that they can figure things out for themselves. And that is one of the cornerstones of learning how to learn. Asking good questions, analyzing information, and learning how to explain, articulate their reasoning. That is all as I said, the cornerstone of someone who really is able to learn throughout their life and find the questions they want answers to. Okay. Okay. Science isn't confined to textbooks or labs. It's all around us. And when we connect this science to real life, it becomes more meaningful. There are 3 powerful ways to do this. Everyday science. For example, talk about chemistry while cooking. Why, when you heat an egg, does it become solid when you made it hotter? There's some really good chemistry. That is an interesting question. Start asking those questions. You can, with Google, ChatGPT, you can get answers. You get pretty good answers. Explore biology in the garden. These moments make science relevant and they're fun. Citizen science. Join platforms like Zooniverse or Globe Observer to contribute to real research. Kids see that science is something they can do. The Audubon thing in February, I always like to do. I actually misidentified a bird this year. And someone from the Audubon Society contacted me to tell me that I had to have misidentified the bird, and they helped me figure out what the species of bird was. It was pretty cool. Read news about climate science, medicine, or space exploration, and ask, what's the science behind this? Where did they get their information? Is this in a good resource? That it helps students to understand the science that is shaping their world, but it also is important for them to understand how to be skeptical about the information until you're sure that it's coming from a good resource. If you want science to truly stick, we need to make it immersive. And that's what I've been talking about so far in this. The other thing is to make it collaborative. Immersive learning means giving kids time to explore a concept from different angles. If your child becomes interested in something, let them read about it, experiment, discuss it, watch videos, and observe it. When they're fully engaged, they remember what they've learned and why it matters. Collaboration is just as important. If you are homeschooling and only, and you're like, how is this going to happen? This slide absolutely doesn't represent what we can make happen. You are another individual. Collaborate, do the labs with your learner. My son is not, didn't go into science, but his science is really strong. I did science with him. We did science together. I homeschooled and only. When he wanted to do science with other people, I ran a co-op. Now, you might not be running a science co-op thinking, oh, okay, Blair, thanks. But find situations, whether it's on OutSchool, in some other way where your child can have other people that they're doing science with. And you can join a co-op if those are available where you live. When kids talk about science and ask questions together or share ideas, they build confidence and learn from each other. When I ran my online classes, the kids would feed off each other. It was really something to see how what one learner's understanding or the work they did on a project really expanded the thinking of the other learners around the science concept that we were working on. Middle and high school science should incorporate math into the lesson, but as I've already said, be thoughtful about that. If that adds too much to the cognitive load of your learner, then don't then let the math take a back seat. This is a science class. This is not a math class. But however, especially for high school students, you are going to want to help them incorporate some math into science, because if they go to college, they will need to have some of those skills. Math is used in science to measure and analyze the world. When your child balances a chemical equation, they're using algebra. When they graph results from an experiment, they're using statistics. When they calculate speed or density, they're applying formulas. Instead of focusing on abstract problems from a textbook, make sure that the math that you are using is paired well with your science so that it is math in context. And that actually will make the math that kids are learning feel more relevant and more purposeful. Curriculum and resources, single subject approach or integrated approach. When you choose the right curriculum and resources, it's a part of building a strong science program. And thankfully, you don't have to do it on your own. And especially for middle and high school, I'm going to recommend that unless you are very strong in those courses, that you outsource this or buy a good curriculum. You should think of your curriculum as your toolkit, not as your master plan. It should support your goals, not dictate them. When I taught college, what they did was hand you a stack of textbooks, test banks, everything that came with the curriculum, and then you designed the course. Nobody can teach everything in an entire curriculum at the college level in one semester or even over 1 year. So you do pick and choose. If you find yourself doing that in a curriculum, that's okay. Be very thoughtful that you are not leaving out important concepts, vocabulary, practices, or procedures when you do that. If it's one developed for the homeschool community that has parsed out the important science that kids should be learning at that level. But again, if nothing else, it is your toolkit. But choosing a curriculum is a big decision that doesn't have to be overwhelming. When you choose it, this is interesting. Huh. Okay. Well, I'm not quite sure. Okay, the slide. Ask yourself, does this, I'm a slide ahead. Does this program focus on understanding or just memorization? Does it include hands-on learning? Does it match my child's strengths and interests? Is it secular or is it a form of indoctrination? And yes, I do mean that. Science that is not secular, why isn't it secular? You should really wonder that. If science is the goal of science is to help your children understand the natural and physical world, why is this science material misrepresenting what the explanation for what is happening in the natural and physical world? To do so is a form of indoctrination. Okay. Now I will get to But however, remember, the best curriculum is the one that works for your family and allows for flexibility and depth. Okay. Single subject versus integrated. And I included this because I am getting so many questions about this these days. Okay. These are the questions to ask. Okay. There. Sorry, everybody. Okay. Single subject, the benefits: build strong foundational knowledge in one discipline, has a clear structure and progression, easier to align with traditional curricula and lab work, and may feel if you some single subjects can feel disconnected from real world applications. And I'll explain when I get to integrated why that is. Every learner should go through single subject at least once. And when you get to high school science, probably will. The reason has to do with the very first point. Single subject science builds strong foundational knowledge in one discipline. And that is really important. It is going to be the important knowledge that forms the core of a discipline. To an integrated approach highlights connections across scientific disciplines, encourages real-world interdisciplinary thinking, is useful in early and middle grades for thematic learning, but for high school, you probably are not going to want to use an integrated approach unless your child has a strong foundation where you've used a single subject approach in earlier grades. The reason for that is that it may lack depth in individual subjects if not carefully designed. Now, you can look for integrated courses that front load, but basically, if you're using an integrated course, for example, on marine science, there's no way to teach all of chemistry. You're just presenting the chemistry that learners are going to need that relates to marine science. So as you can see, that can be a problem if if you have a child who thinks they want to go into STEM, that in the later grades, that can really be problematic if they don't have, again, the strong foundation for the core disciplines in science. Okay, managing cognitive load. This is something that's often overlooked. I brought it up in the context of math, but it's easy to do too much. New vocabulary, new content, new procedures. And when that happens, kids get overwhelmed. And when that happens, they're not curious at all. Managing cognitive load means breaking learning into manageable steps and building on what they already know. I was one of the problems with waiting to you'll hear people say you can wait on science. When you wait on science, you are creating a situation where it is much more likely that your child is going to be overloaded when they get to late middle school to high school level science. Why? Because they don't have the core basic knowledge that those courses are assuming your learner has. I was volunteering at a science fair one time and was sat down at a table with about 15 people, and everybody went around the table talking about what they did. And one of the things that when they found out that I wrote science courses for the homeschool community, they actually said that homeschoolers were lucky that because most homeschool kids get science earlier than traditional school kids. And one of the things that high school science teachers are seeing is they've got all of these things that they are required to teach kids, and they get these kids that have had really limited formal exposure to science, and the kids aren't able to handle the high school level science because they're completely overloaded. There's too much new content at once. Students have nothing to build on. And so that is something that you probably don't want to happen to your learner if you're at this talk. If you see your learner starts to be overloaded, Use scaffolding, model your thinking and your understanding, guide them. Don't just make it independent until you see that they're ready to be independent, whether that's through their lab techniques or their mastery of the information. Mastery takes time. If you've waited on science, slow down when you need to. And in that situation, go for depth over breadth. You do not want this to feel, a good science course shouldn't feel like a seminar course. And, break that science course into 2 years if you have to, but make sure that your learner gets the depth that they need in the core science subjects. I thought that you might be interested in the ages of stages of science learning. I don't want to spend a lot of time on this slide. You'll be able to see it on replay. Early elementary, you want to build curiosity. There's no reason to make this particularly content heavy. Have fun with this, explore with this. Late elementary, kids are ready for some concrete thinking and they have a growing attention span. So it's a good time to introduce foundational concepts. I actually think that the early elementary is as well. But you want to tie the foundational concepts with a lot of exploration. Of course, if you're doing hands-on science, that's easy to do. Middle grades, kids are ready to start abstract thinking and formal logic. And you should definitely be emphasizing conceptual understanding, the scientific method. And when you do lab work, the lab work should include data analysis, and group discussion here can be just you and your learner, but make sure that they are articulating their learning around science. That's an important metacognitive skill to include so that they are more likely to gain mastery. High school, you want deeper content knowledge, formal lab reports and structured inquiry. The first time your child writes a lab report, you do not want to be in a college class. You should be looking at college and career readiness focus as far as where your learner, don't assume that your learner is not going to go into science. My family cannot believe that someone went into science. I just fell in love with science in college. No one else in my family saw that interested in science. They can't believe I went into science and didn't become a medical doctor. Because that to them is the only reason to get a science education. Science skills for middle school. Core science skills. You want them to use the scientific method, conduct safe experiments, measure accurately, record and analyze data. This is all, I've included these because in case I get questions, I'm going to come back to this. I'm going to move on to the high school. If you have questions, I really included this so I could pull them up if I got any specific questions about this. Here is the high school science that prepares for college. Core expectations. This is what a college expects from your learner. And most colleges keep lab reports and records. I had colleges ask to see the college that my son, San Diego State, asked to see lab reports. In particular, they wanted to see a lab report from the environmental science course he took. They wanted to make sure that we were not climate deniers. I know, because I actually asked the people, the admissions counselors, but they wanted to see detailed course descriptions and a syllabus. Consider outside validation. I have had several students that took my high school science course have me write letters of recommendation for them. So that is something, but you can also, that you might want to think about if your child wants to go into science. It's always nice for them to take a class with a teacher who will give them that. But dual enrollment is a great way to meet your high school learner science requirement. This is all the ways right now that you can connect with us. We're thinking about a couple more. Kat doesn't know it, so I don't want to say it and stress her out. If you have any questions or comments, I really appreciate those people that ask them on our social media because it bumps our social media reach out. We have a new series called This is Homeschooling. One of the types of videos you'll find in that is help for your homeschool. And I would love to get together with anyone who wants some hand holding as they figure out what next year's going to look like. I will be happy to do that with you. All my books are on sale, as you can see. Most of them are science. I'm adding writing, and I've got some project-based learning as a component of those. And this is a way that you can get in touch with me.